Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Conference realignment in college sports has been insane. We've already talked about all the moves before. USC, UCLA to the Big Ten, Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC, and then now you've got Colorado going back to the Big 12, and tons of other movement. But now we've got more rumors circulating around in the college sports world with the possible addition that the Big Ten could be making with 4 extra teams. Oregon, Washington, Florida State, and Clemson are being rumored to be joining the Big Ten possibly this week. Now, that does not mean that this is going to happen. I have no idea. That's why there's a question mark in this thumbnail. I always want to make sure when it's not 100% true to point out that this has not happened yet, but it is just a rumor. But the fact that there are a lot of rumors happening right now about this, and the fact that there's so many people talking about it, is adding more and more validity to the possibility that the Big Ten is actually adding these 2 Pac-12 schools and these 2 ACC schools. And this is huge because when you look at the remaining schools that are not in the Big Ten or the SEC from these other conferences that have a lot of standing in the college sports world because of the fact these are major universities that have a lot of brand appeal and pull, and they're going to make a lot of money for either the Big Ten or the SEC if they do join. You look at these schools, and Oregon, Washington, Florida State, and Clemson are at the top. Yes, you still have Notre Dame hanging around as an independent in football, at least, or in the ACC for other sports, and there's a few other schools that you could say have some pull and appeal, but I would have to argue that these 4 schools are definitely 4 of the top 5, not including Notre Dame, of the schools left that have not joined the Big Ten or the SEC. And if all 4 of these schools go to the Big Ten, I'm sorry, SEC, it does not mean that you're no longer potentially the best conference in college sports, at least in football anyway, and drawing in the most money. But I would have to argue that the Big Ten is now going to have the biggest pull of all the conferences in college sports, because you're going to now have USC, UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and then now you're adding Clemson, Florida State, and Oregon, Washington. The Big Ten by far is going to be making the most money in their media rights deal, and the academics as well will be through the roof. That's a big reason why some people thought that Clemson and Florida State wouldn't be a good fit for the SEC, because their academics are higher than the standards that are in the SEC. I think both those schools would fit a little bit better than Oregon, Washington. A lot of people have thought that Oregon and Washington were locks for the Big Ten. There's even been some rumors about the Big 12 as well for Oregon and Washington, but why would they go to the Big 12? It doesn't make sense, because the Big 12 academically is not an elite conference. The Big 10 is. Oregon and Washington have much better academics than the Big 12, and the fact that the Big 10 already added USC, UCLA, it makes complete sense to add Oregon, Washington. Geography's out the window in all of this, because if you're going off geography, Clemson, Florida State should go to the SEC over the Big 10. They don't make sense in the Big 10 at all. They're down in the deep south. That would not even make any sense, but it doesn't matter anymore. Geography doesn't matter. There are LA schools now going to the Big 10, and now possibly you're going to have 2 teams from the Pacific Northwest, and you're going to have Clemson in South Carolina, and you're also going to have Florida State from the state of Florida going to the Big 10, very possibly, if this comes to pass. Now, again, if this does happen for the Big 10, this just shows you that the Big 10 is for real and serious and wanting to be one of the 2 super conferences. I'm completely against the super conference idea. I liked it a lot better when you had it back in the 90s, where you had the Big East, the Big 8, the Southwest Conference. It was still the Pac-10. The Big 10 only had 10 teams in it before they added Penn State. The ACC was smaller. The SEC was smaller. The Big 12 wasn't even in existence yet, because you had the Southwest Conference and the Big 8. But it made it very competitive, and you didn't have it where these conferences were overloading each other, and where we're at now, where the SEC and the Big 10 are the top 2 conferences, and every other conference is basically falling apart at the seams to even try to keep up. And look at the ACC. I mean, they're a conference that has a lot of brand, especially in football, if they could get their act together, like Florida State, Miami. Florida State's been coming around lately. Clemson as well. North Carolina and Duke are great on the basketball court, and there's just a lot of other stuff going right for the ACC, but they didn't get a media rights deal together. That was actually worth a lot of money. They got a poor deal with ESPN that was lasting well into the 2030s. That was not worth nowhere near as much as the SEC or the Big 10, and now you have the possibility of Clemson, Florida State leaving for the Big 10. That would completely destroy the ACC. If Miami and some of these other teams do join the SEC as well, or some other conference in the future, the ACC could fall apart. The Big 12 is trying to be smart by adding Colorado. They're being smart by adding some of these other teams like BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, but they're not brands. They're not big enough teams to be able able to save the conference. And then the Pac-12, they did nothing at all to fix their media rights problem. They haven't even conceded the new media rights deal. At least the Big 12 did that, and the ACC, despite the ACC's deal not being good at all whatsoever. But the Pac-12, they don't have a media rights deal. Their network is not even on television. They don't even have it on hardly any streaming services, so no one can watch it. That really hurt them in the money department. And despite their academics being great, that's why all these teams potentially are jumping shark to the Big Ten, because the Big Ten is also a great academics conference as well. And now these schools are going to make much more athletics money to boot as well, and TV money, and that's what this is all about at the end of the day. Money drives everything these days in the college sports world, and that's fine. I understand it. I mean, you can't blame these schools for wanting to go to these conferences that are going to make them $100 million per school versus the Big 12, Pac-12, and the ACC that just cannot keep up, and they're only going to get like 30, 40 million. I completely understand, but we're getting closer and closer to two super conferences, and if the Big Ten does add Florida State and Clemson out of the ACC and Oregon and Washington out of the Pac-12, this will make the Big Ten, at least financially, the #1 conference in the college sports world. Maybe the SEC can still keep up with recruiting and the fact Georgia, Alabama are so dominant in football, and there's a lot of athletics money running around down the South, and there's just such fandom in the SEC that there's going to be so much money right there. Maybe they can still keep their standing as the #1 conference, at least on the football field. But financially, if the Big Ten adds these 4 teams and the SEC can't really add anyone else besides maybe some teams from the Big 12 or maybe some teams from the ACC like Miami, I think that the Big Ten will be the #1 conference, at least financially and academically, by far over every other conference. And I think that's what the Big Ten wants. They want that appeal all over the country. They want to be a continental conference, having reach all over the place, and it's really smart. The Big Ten did not want to get left behind by the SEC. The SEC made the first move, adding Oklahoma and Texas, and everybody thought that they were going to be the #1 conference by far in college sports. But now the Big Ten's like, nope, we're not going to be falling behind. We're adding USC, UCLA, and now the potential of these 4 teams. Again, this is not confirmed at all. We do not know if it's going to happen, but with all these rumors going around and with all this realignment talk that has come to pass, most of the rumors have come true. So it's looking very viable for the Big Ten to add these teams. I think Oregon, Washington are great fits. They're great fits academically. The fact you already have USC, UCLA in the conference, I feel like Oregon, Washington will be great additions to the Big Ten with the way this is going. And then with Clemson, Florida State, they're kind of outliers in the middle of nowhere, but who knows? Maybe if the Big Ten can add North Carolina and Duke as well or something like that, maybe Georgia Tech, that could possibly help add to that wing of the conference. But the SEC is going to be interesting to see how they respond. It's going to be interesting as well to see if this comes to pass at all, or whether the ACC can keep Florida State and Clemson, or the Pac-12 can keep Oregon and Washington. It's not looking good for either conference right now. They're definitely on the brink. They have to make some moves right now to save these teams from leaving their conference, because once they're gone, they're not getting them back. The Big Ten and the SEC, whichever teams they have, they're going to keep. We're getting closer and closer to two super conferences. I do not like it, but that is the world that we are living in right now. And if you are a team in the sports world, you definitely want to be in the Big Ten or the SEC right now, because if you are not, you could get left behind in the dust. Some of these other teams that the Big Ten and SEC do not want to add, they're just in bad shape right now, and maybe they'll have to band together, combine the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC remains, who knows, to create a third other conference that can kind of compete with the other two, even though they really won't be able to. I have no idea what's going to happen. Everything is up in the air, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen here. Hopefully, for the sake of the ACC and the Pac-12, they don't lose these teams yet, but if the Big Ten adds all 4, then they have definitely leapfrogged the SEC financially, maybe not on the football field and some of the other sports, but the SEC's got some catching up to do, possibly with the Big Ten if they add these 4 teams. But expansion talk is getting crazier and crazier, and the Big Ten, you definitely can tell, is serious about expansion, and they're doing everything they possibly can to become the premier conference in college sports, especially if they add these 4 teams in Oregon, Washington, Clemson, and Florida State. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about the possibility of Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, and Washington going to the Big Ten, whether you think it's going to happen, whether you think it should happen, and if it does happen, will the Big Ten be the best conference in college sports over the SEC, at least financially? Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.